Okay.
Okay, I will chair at least until Gary arrives. And if you'll bear with me, I'm having some difficulty reading from the board today from my screen. Age is catching up with me, I'm afraid. Oh, thank you, Chris. So discussion protocol for virtual meetings. We'll use the standard protocol. Ask you to raise a hand to be identified before speaking to make things easier. Call to order. This is the July meeting of the College Place Historic Preservation Commission. We are at what? Bastille Day +1. I am required as a professional to make reference to that. Although my daughter tells me it's pronounced Bastille, but then I'm German, so I'll pronounce it any way I want. Roll call. I don't see the list here, so I'll just go down through the pictures that I see. Mike Denny.
Present.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Stan Green.
Present.
Gary Peterson, not here yet. Ed Kuntz, did I see Ed? And I'm Terrell Gottschall. Bernie, I'm named for Lake Terrell, which if I recall is about 10 miles west of Bellingham, where my mother used to swim many, many years ago.
Yeah, I know where that is.
Let me call for an approval of the agenda and the minutes from the meeting on June 17. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Nothing from Stan? Okay. In that case, let me call for a motion to approve both the agenda. I'm sorry, both the agenda and the minutes. Do I hear a motion? Thank you, Stan. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, nay. The motion is passed. Are there any public comments?
Staff has not received any. Lisa, have you received any?
I have not, and there are no attendees at this moment.
Okay.
Thank you, John and Christy. In that case, let's move on to the regular agenda. The first item being the Poor Farm Cemetery GPR. John, can you introduce Bernie formally and let him talk about his draft report?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We have Mr. Bernard Hausen. He's PhD with the Geography Department at Western Washington University, and he is our consultant on the project. We received a grant from the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation to conduct a geophysical survey of the Walla Walla County Poor Farm. And so back in, I guess it was March, on March 18th, we had our first public meeting. We're required to have two. This is our second one. In May, Bernie was on site with his equipment and crew, and they performed the GPR survey. And so he is now here with the draft report, which is attached and available for your guys' review and feedback. And Bernie is going to provide us with a presentation. And I think I will allow you to share now. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and you should be able to share yours.
Yeah, I just have to pick the right one.
Right, I know.
So you should just see a PowerPoint slide.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. This, like I said earlier, this has been a really great opportunity and an interesting project. So let's take it away. So I was assisted on this project by some family members, but my co-author Olivia Hausen is a GIS technician for a consulting firm, so she's helped with some of the GIS maps. All right, now I have to, there we go. All right, so I'm not going to go over the methods because we did that last time. So this is, we'll just jump right into the survey. So we use the ground penetrating radar. So it you know, will reflect back any differences in the subsurface. This is a drone photo. So we flew some drone photos on the site too. So this is our GPR cart, and the little white thing on top is a GPS antenna. So the data are all geolocated with the GPS antenna. And we essentially just move this thing back and forth over the whole entire site with 2 meter spacing for the better part of the day. So it was a good site. It was nice, clear, easy to survey. So we got some good results. In fact, as you'll see, we almost have too many good results. So this is just an overview. This is a Google Earth image. So like I said, we covered the whole area. We collected 124 different GPR paths. This map here shows the areas that we collected. And so just to handle the data in the presentation, I broke this down into 3 different areas. So area A is the, you know, I guess we'll call it the main area or the cemetery proper. Area B is Sandpiper Lane. And then area C is the railroad area to the south. And so we covered everything to the best of our ability. There were 2 cars parked in area B. We worked around them. I don't think it compromised the survey in any way. And then we did have to stop and start lines on the other side, on either side of the you know, the trees and little area with the monuments, as well as the historical sign. The other thing, so you all had a survey of the area done recently, and so we had those data, and the black box is the GIS located boundaries of that survey, and we use the stake on the southeast side as the ground control for our coordinate system. So the GPR lines were located using that as the origin point, using measuring tapes to make sure we're measuring every 2 feet. And then, so that allows us to place all of our data in a really firm framework on the site itself. So that's how this is set up. Area, the green, let's see, oh, sorry. Is it the green? Yeah, the green is an overlay of one of the older surveys. I think it's the 1955 one. I'm not sure. Trying to match those up a little bit. Okay, so one of the challenges is putting all of these different surveys that we have for the site in the same geographic framework. This is the 1921 plat map that you all sent to me. So this is also useful. What's most handy about that is it has accurate dimensions of all of the plats or the plots, along with their numbers and the distances between those. So we can also use this to compare with our radar data. The challenge is really locating the corner of that plot in the modern kind of environment. So that's going to be kind of a challenge, but having the overall footprint of the platted out cemetery, I think is helpful. Yeah, this is just another
I have
image.
a question.
Sure.
So back to the 1921 map. So it's my perception that this over on the right, those smaller boxes represent a layout of grave sites within each of those plots. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, so they followed a system, and I was able to locate online. There are some written records from the 20s, 30s, and it looked like early 40s, where you actually had the plot number and the burial site number recorded for different burials. And I think that filling in this map with those data and any other data, any other records like that, would be pretty helpful. So I think we could improve things by filling in this map with any of the tabulated burial data that exists. And I have no idea how to find all of that, but anyway. So yes, and then you can also see that they've marked out burial plots that kind of, I don't know, go against their layout. So there are some that are marked out and probably used in the alleyways between the plots. So it's not going to be the burial locations aren't going to be limited to the plots, I guess, is the best way to think about that. And that's pretty common. Okay, so this is the 1955 map of the Poor Farm showing the cemetery. And I think we can use the center lane of the highway to help locate that as well. So that's something that we can play around with in the GIS. Okay, so I want to get to the data. So I have the data plotted out in two different ways. I have this is a version where we've essentially just used the rectilinear coordinates of the survey to show the different lines, and then we can put the data in that frame, and then we can easily transform this frame into the GIS, into the real world, I guess. And so the little tiny red dot that you can barely see, that's the corner. So that's that. I have a blow up of that in the next slide. But anyway, so we recorded the line number. There's a little arrow that shows which way we ran the little cart, because that's where the 0 in the data line goes. So we have to keep track of that. And this is essentially showing how we covered the area. So we covered it pretty thoroughly, which was good. Like I said, here's a little blow up. So the little red thing on the bottom corner is the 0, 0, the origin of our coordinate system. And that was set exactly at the flagged survey mark, the stake that was put in for the modern survey. So all of these data will be, easily preserved and portrayed in the framework of that new survey. Okay, this is just another drone photo showing where we've laid the tape. You can see the stake, you can see the railroad line. Yeah, I think that's my daughter in blue running the drone. So what do these data look like? So this is a figure from the report. I did not reproduce in the report all of these lines, but I will in the final report. So the report will contain every image like this from the data. What I like to do is show the uninterpreted data. So that's on top, and then the interpreted data is on the bottom. The amount of gray or white is used to portray how strong the radar reflection is. So the blacker the black or the whiter the white, the stronger the amplitude of the reflection. Okay. So what we're looking for are, let's see if I can do this. Oh, am I allowed to annotate? Oh, I am. What we're looking for are, different features. So we can see in some cases there's like a continuous line. So that's going to be, a geological feature. So it would be probably in this case, I'm sure it's fill associated with the burials above and the more natural sediment below. What we're looking for are these little hyperbola shaped things, which are, where you have a non-continuous object that is reflecting the radar waves. So this would be like the corner of a coffin. It would be a smaller object like those cylindrical discs. It could be a pipe. It could be a rock. It could be a smaller casket for a burial of an infant, things like that. So what we did is just went through and systematically picked the locations of all of those objects. On the bottom, I kind of illustrate those. So we have some very bright reflections. Those are marked in red. So this one here, and where'd that go? This one here. If they're near the surface, they're probably sprinkler pipes, but we can't be 100% sure. The ones I've marked in blue are the ones that are most likely associated with the burials, and so those are the ones that we've recorded as a GPR target. And you can see, as some of you discussed with me at the last meeting or on site, that there might be evidence that we do have burials that are stacked at different depths, and there are different sizes. And so looking at the memorial sign that's put up and looking at those records, there are quite a lot of infant burials. And so a lot of these small ones like this probably are a set of infant burials like that. The other thing too that we can observe with the radar data is that there are some places where the ground surface, and I've kind of bracketed those in these little green markers, where the ground is disturbed. And those are those subsided areas that you can see just walking around, or you can see in the air photos. And so I think a more detailed comparison between those where they show up on the ground in the photos and where they show up on the GPR data will help us in the final draft of this better locate those. So I'm going to make a version of that map that has these subsided areas, and then we can put that on the photo overlay as well.
I have a question.
Sure.
So the green line going along the bottom of both of the rectangular brackets,
Right.
that's approximately how many inches or feet deep? I don't have my glasses. I can't read the scale here on the left side.
So the bottom scale is like 8 feet. I would say that's a nominal depth because I haven't analyzed the radar velocity. It's probably a little overestimate. But anyway, that green line is essentially where we're losing the signal.
It goes that deep, but no deeper.
Right.
Thank you.
This is Stanley Green. I have another question.
Sure.
So the blue marks, let's say those might be an actual burial site. Would that be the top of where, say, the hole was and where the coffin was, or what's the typical depth for burial that we might have expected from this era?
That's a good question. So to start, yes. So these are recording the top of the feature. The bottom of the features are really difficult to record. So yes, the depth of burial, that's a really good question. And I'm not sure at this site how best to answer it, because we do know that the ground was leveled. And I don't know how much material might have been removed during that process. It's probably a good bet that you might encounter the tops of some of the burials, 1.5 or 2 feet deep. And I know this is very small. So the nominal depth of 2 feet is about right there.
So excuse me, when you say it was it leveled after burials had taken place?
That's my understanding, because there were markers and other things on the site. So wasn't this leveled a bit after the trailer park was platted and set up? This is where you all might have better information than I do.
I believe that it had become pasture, and there were still monuments and markers, kind of at grade. But boy, who could we talk to find out if they had actually leveled? I could be mistaken, but the streets are all lower than this piece of ground where the cemetery, I believe.
Yeah, so they've graded out, or graded out the streets. Anyway.
Yeah, I think they graded the streets, but they might not have disturbed the cemetery itself that much. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But anyway, so I guess the main point is that the original surface at the time of the cemetery can be uncertain because we don't have the outlines of the plats or anything like that aren't readily apparent.
So this is John. A few years ago, the park management approached the city about filling in the divots, and you can see them in the aerial imagery. And depending on which year you look at, you can kind of see the depressions.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, it certainly was graded because it was, the stories I've heard is that it was overgrown with weeds and most of the concrete cylinders are not visible anymore. They've been buried, is the thought, except for a few that got turned up, and we have those set in that in those trees. So some grading,
Yeah.
but you can still kind of see, when you're out there, even you probably felt it when you were running your equipment over it.
Yeah, no, you could definitely do that. And I think, doing a drone-based LiDAR survey to pick up those depressions might also be kind of a fun thing to try. Yeah, I think that it's safe to say that the burials are relatively shallow because that's what is producing those depressions is the collapse and decay of the buried objects.
So
the coffins and the people and stuff.
This is Mike. As I understand it, the last burial there was in 1942, and it was not used after that. And it pretty much became a horse pasture. And it was that way clear until the park was platted. So I don't know that it was ever leveled or graded out, but it was fairly level, as I understand it, with the railroad.
Okay.
That just to the south of it. So.
All right, well, I'm going to move on. This is just a blow up of some of those features. And what I wanted to do here is just show, this is one of those very, bright reflectors that I marked in red. And these are interesting. And because I think that if we're going to be detecting one of those cylindrical markers, that's what it would look like in the radar record. So I've tried to pick those out where I saw them and used a different symbology. The other thing, though, and I'll show you on the map, is that these could also be the sprinkler pipes or some other pipes that traverse the site. And so the way we'll figure that out is whether they all line up in a nice line or not. Yeah, just show these are just other zoom ins of the radargrams from, you know, a couple of other lines. So again, we can see one of these brighter areas, and these are two that are 4 feet apart because I wanted to have them in the same, excuse me, the same direction. But you know, this really looks to me like an area where we have multiple burials in one site, one plot.
So this is Gary Peterson. So I can see these tiny, tiny little red dots.
Right.
I see the rectangle that you drew in red. This is for the example on the left.
Mhm.
Approximately how big is that red rectangle that you drew?
So the scale on the top is feet. So this is, you know, 20 feet.
Feet, okay.
Yeah. And each of those little red dots is literally where in the radar program I picked the target. So the coordinates that the map that I'll show you with all of the data, that's a map of all of these little red dots.
So are you manually putting those little red dots there? Does the program identify it and then you evaluate?
Yeah, no, I can't, the thing does have an auto picker, but I didn't trust it. So yes, I reviewed and picked all of the little dots.
Oh my.
That's why it took a little while.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the map of the dots. So this is the rectilinear map. I've highlighted a few of the brighter reflectors in the red. Otherwise, the blue dots are all little tiny red dots. So I guess the best way to summarize this is, one, there are a whole lot of dots here. So there's abundant evidence of objects that are buried beneath the site. You know, we can, since I have the drawing pencil, we can connect some of the dots. And, you know, this is probably a pipe. That's probably a pipe. But all the rest are objects that are likely associated with the burials. It's pretty difficult to say, well, you know, these 3 points are, you know, one person's burial site or not. To me, that's a challenge. But I think we do have areas where, you know, like in here, that's probably where we have a bunch of little burials or burials at a different level, at different levels within the same location. I was actually hoping to get a little less data than this and have, you know, things show up very nicely and be able to identify individual burials, but there's a lot of stuff in the subsurface here.
My, I guess.
We do see some patterns though. So the density of the dots decreases as you go from east to west. And there are a few places where there seem to be fewer burials.
The closer to the railroad track, the fewer there are. Is that my understanding?
That seems to be the case. Yeah. And there's definitely a lot more in the northeast corner quadrant.
This is Gary with another question. Would wood leave this kind of ping or indication of something there? You know, wood's kind of a halfway between a solid and organic, or would this be some sort of hardware like a nail or a screw?
So wood would definitely do this. And the other thing I didn't mention is that some of these are undoubtedly tree roots around the trees. when we get up there. But wood, is different enough from the soil that it will produce one of these reflectors. If it's a nail or a piece of hardware, it actually has to be, a certain size to produce a reflection. So it would probably have to be, a few inches across.
That's a lot of material, man.
Yeah. If this were glacial till, I would wonder if these are little cobbles and stuff, but that's not what this is.
No.
This is Stanley Green. I am assuming that most of the coffins were wooden and that few, if any of them, were placed in anything remotely resembling a concrete vault.
Right. Yeah. I think that's definitely true. And the other thing I should have mentioned is that these types of reflections, they are pretty faint for the most part. And that's consistent with, old wood, no concrete liners or anything like that. So, the cemeteries that we've done up here in Whatcom County, they have a lot stronger reflections because of those different materials being more commonly used.
So I'm just curious, that area has a fairly high water table. How would that affect your read? Because I know at one point the water table was probably no more than 3 feet under the ground there, 4 feet.
Yeah, you'll get a contrast, and that might be, if I go back to this right here, that's possibly the water table.
Okay.
Yeah. The best way to figure that out would be to repeat this survey, or repeat a portion of the survey like now when it's been super dry, because I would guess that if that's the water table, we'll find it down here now.
Yeah. How does the water table affect your reflectivity, though, coming off of other objects?
Well, it will. So water is more electrically conductive, so it's going to wash out things a little bit, and you might be seeing some of that here, right? So there's a lot less texture in this area than in the area up here.
Okay.
Would the reflection be different from a wooden box which was buried, say, fairly recently and the wood is still fairly intact, in contrast to a wooden box that's been underground for many, many decades or a century and has probably decomposed substantially?
Yeah, that's definitely the case. So, if we look at some of this data, and I'm getting arm wavy now, I'm going to outline this one. That's a pretty good one. This one here is less well developed, less, lower amplitude. It's a little fainter. And so, newer, older, that would be the pattern that you would expect.
Okay. Well, with 700 plus buried there, I guess I'm not all that surprised.
Yeah, it's so let me move on, because I what we've done is we've shown these maps in a couple of different ways, and one of the ones, and this is in the report, I've tried to overlay the cemetery plat plots on this as a kind of a comparison. Yeah, this is just a little zoom in. This is what it looks like in GIS coordinates. So again, like I mentioned, we can use those depressions in the photo overlays. And the other thing we haven't done yet is georeference the drone photos. So we have the entire area covered in these drone photos. So I think we can do a good job of mapping out the depressions in the GIS framework that way. There's a difference in the color symbology. I had a little problem with the GPS data logger, so the first 12 lines didn't have GPS data. Everything else is GPSed. And then the other thing, I'm not showing you any of the Google Earth data, but we can put these into Google Earth as well, and they'll be in those files will be in the report. Yeah, so this is what I was getting at. So given the size of those plots and the distances between them and how many there were, you can put them to the same scale. So here's what I did. And I just used a decent guesstimate of where the cemetery boundary might be on the east side. And looked, basically what I was looking for are evidence for some of these alleyways. And this is totally non-unique, but this is my best guess right now of where we would put the cemetery plots on this map. It's also possible this could get shifted a bit to the north.
Wow.
So yeah, but I think the remark that there's a whole lot of data, but there's also a whole lot of folks buried here. I felt better when I put this overlay on there, because quite frankly, looking at just all of those dots was a little overwhelming, but I think it kind of works with this. So
This is Gary, and I have another question. What we're looking at the screen now, there are the plots that are kind of a gray color, and then there are white, what look like, I think you called them alleys.
yeah.
But there are blue dots in the alleys just as much as they are in the gray plot areas, it appears to.
Yeah, so either this overlay is wrong, or if we go back to the 1921 map, they put burial lots in the alleys on that map.
So they would have buried perhaps in the alley. It was probably just grass anyway.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So my understanding, the cemetery lots or plots, whatever we want to call them, they're essentially so that the sextons, the grave digger guys can just keep track of things. But the cemeteries up here, they have folks buried in the alleys all the time. So they don't have to obey they can color outside of the lines, I guess.
So one thing that I discovered is that a lot of the people that were buried here at the poor farm were stricken with tuberculosis. And I think they were trying to get those bodies buried as quick as they could. And I don't think they were sticking with the little burial, the 3x6, whatever it was. I think they were getting them in the ground as quick as they could get them.
Yeah. Well, and the other question too is, how often did they, bury a batch of folks?
Yeah.
And so just, excavate a larger area and then fill that in, kind of like a small mass grave kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Mike, question for you, pardon me. You said the last burial was in 1942.
Correct.
When was the first?
The first burial that I'm aware of was in 1891.
So 700 and about 50 years.
Correct.
Thank you.
And there were quite a few epidemics that hit the area in that space of 50 years. There was typhoid, TB, smallpox, all kinds of, and several repetitious epidemics that struck of the same disease over and over. And so people were constantly, mortality was going up and up, especially with the typhoid, because a lot of people were not boiling their water and they were passing from that. And then the smallpox in the early 1910s, 1920s took a lot of people as well.
Well, and there's a great influenza pandemic in that period also.
Right.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that is what was the effect of the 1919 pandemic?
It was large. Hundreds of people died in the Walla Walla Valley from that.
Okay. Shall I move on?
Yep.
All right, so we're almost done. So I just wanted to show a few images of the other areas that we're not discussing very much. So this is Area B, located under Sandpiper Lane. There's some weak evidence for possible burials, like here. But I think these are probably larger utilities that are, 3 or 4 feet beneath the ground. I think what we're looking at here, this is the bottom of the, prepared roadway. This would be the roadway itself up here. So this would be, the natural ground. And we do see some other kind of, geology contact kind of information here. I didn't see anything that would be, super suggestive of the burials continuing out here. And then this is the railroad area. So these lines are all going east-west instead of north-south. And I do need to, plot the picks. So I've picked out, like in here, I've picked out a few. This right here might be either a piece of railroad tie, a spike, but it could also be a survey post or something. We do see, though, a lot of, kind of, if you look at this area here, there's a lot of choppiness, and I think that's from the railroad.
Eyes.
Yeah.
With regard to Sandpiper Lane, would the asphalt interfere with the signals coming through clearly?
No, it's the asphalt's enough like a rock that it just shows up as the surface reflector. Yeah, in fact, the road companies or cities, counties use GPR to gauge the condition and thickness of the asphalt and bridge decks and things like that. All right, so the conclusions and recommendations. So there's significant evidence of burials at the Poor Farm Cemetery site, which is good. I think that the correlation between the plots and individual burials could be improved by attempting to just assess who was what type of burials were most common in each of those plot areas, if that's possible. So I did look at, there were 2 record books that I found on online that, have that information in there. So they don't record where within the lot the exact burial was, but, it said who was buried if there was a name, or if it was an infant, it would just say infant. So that could improve the ability to, look at those areas and then try and pick out the most likely individual burials. The thing that I will do is look at the surface depressions in the GPR data and those depressions that you can see in the air photos. So once I get the air photos registered in the GIS, we'll use that to also kind of ground truth the data points here. And then the other thing is I think it would be really nice to see if there's some kind of air photo somewhere of the cemetery. So I'm going to talk to some of the people at the Washington Geological Survey and at the DNR. They might have access to that. I think at Central they have an archive of air photos as well. So yeah, so the ability to tie that 1921 plat map into a modern coordinates would be helpful, I think. So that's it. What I'd like to get a sense of is, what details you would like to, if I'm missing any details, or if you have questions, suggestions, anything along that line.
I'm just curious, if somebody had been cremated and buried in an urn, would you be able to pick up an urn?
Oh yeah, so that would be one of those small bright targets. If it were metallic, it would show up like those, like what we're thinking might be the concrete thing. So if urns are common at the site, that would be a possible interpretation of some of those bright reflectors.
Okay.
If it were more like a coffee can urn, yeah, you might not see that at all after so many years.
Right. Because I do know that some of the folks were in fact cremated, especially after the smallpox epidemics, they were cremated. So I don't know how many, I have no idea, but I do know that there's some coffee can burials there.
So in that case, the best prospect to have evidence from the GPR data would be that the ground layering would be disturbed, and we do see areas where it's clearly not the regular stratified reflections.
Right. Okay.
So did they actually bury human ashes in the kind of a coffee can that had a metal lid? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yes, they did.
It takes a lot of heat to, cremate something. I wonder what they would have had or used back then. I thought cremation was kind of a post-World War II type of change of burial.
I do not know who was doing the cremating, but I did understand after reading several different sources that, especially after smallpox outbreaks, those that passed were cremated.
Gary, there's a crematorium in a cemetery in Troy, New York, where I went to grad school, and it has crematorium facilities that were gas fired from the 1880s.
Wow. Is there a more powerful type of radar that might give better definition, or short of actually excavating? This is probably the best we can do.
Yeah, the only other geophysical technique I would think of would be to do a magnetic anomaly survey, but I don't think that that's going to be as effective if most of the burials were in, simple wooden boxes. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And, the radar conditions were good. So I don't think we can do much better. The only thing we could do is, do 1 foot spacing lines, double the data. But I don't think, you would image much. We probably didn't miss very much here.
Wouldn't make it any more clear.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wow.
Should I stop sharing or?
Yeah, thank you so much, Bernie. Any last questions for Bernie before we release him?
I don't have any, but thank you very much for stepping in when I was late getting here.
Hey, Bernie, what is the schedule for the final? When do you think you'll have that completed?
Well, when do you need it? I want to get this off my plate, so I want to say the end of next week.
Okay, yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So, and if anybody has a question or a suggestion for, something you would like to see in the report, or if you just have a general question, let me know. You all have my email, I think.
Okay, thank you so much. Very interesting.
Fascinating. Thank you, Bernie.
Yep. Thank you. This is a good project. Thanks.
Thank you.
The last item on the agenda was a report from Mike, I think, on the status of the book. Is that correct?
You are correct. So everything has been sent in to the city has it. I'm going to be meeting with Christy tomorrow and putting all the photos in the chapters, and we will be done. So also on July 29 at Fort Walla Walla Museum, I'm going to be giving the after hours program on the history of College Place. So it'll start at 5 p.m. and you can show up in person or by Zoom, whichever you wish to do. So anyway.
That was July 29th?
Correct. At 5 p.m. and it will be it's the first face-to-face after hours that they've held. All of them have been by Zoom. And so this will be the first one. So get there early.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Nothing here.
Well, Gary, you're chair now, so would you like to adjourn our meeting?
Hearing no objection, I call for adjournment of this meeting. Do I hear of a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That sounded unanimous to me. Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah.
See you
Hey,
all
cool.
next month.
Yeah, I'm here.